Right, okay, it's recording now. Good day, everyone. My name is Eric Wolf, and I serve as the Executive Director of the World Food Travel Association based in Portland, Oregon. And I am joined today by Amanda Niode of the Omar Niode Foundation in Jakarta, Indonesia. And Amanda will be sharing her experience about Indonesia as an emerging foodie destination. I'd like to thank all of the delegates for attending our first online food travel summit ever. We had 113 registered delegates from 24 countries, which we think is a tremendous success for a first-time event. And I would really like to thank you for attending and listening to the presentations. I think we got some really fantastic speakers. I know it takes time out of your schedule, and we wouldn't have such a great summit if it wasn't for you. So thank you, delegates. Now, true to the format of our summits, we won't be reading the speakers' bios or session description. Those are on the website. I know that you've looked at them many times and you know who's speaking and what they're speaking about. So with that, I will turn things over to Amanda. Amanda, I'll make you presenter, and you should be good to go. In just a moment. There we go.
Hi, thank you for attending this session. And thank you, Eric, for organizing this online summit. My name is Amanda Katili Niode, and I live in Indonesia. I'm the chair of Omar Niode Foundation, a nonprofit organization based in Jakarta that works to raise awareness of the quality of education and human resources in the field of agriculture, food, and culinary arts. The foundation's programs encompass thesis scholarships and travel awards, books and publications, and public events. And we work with the government, business and professionals, and local people to explore the wealth of Indonesian culinary and the benefits of food travel for the communities. Last year, in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy in Indonesia and the World Food Travel Association, we organized a big seminar on exploring food travel and its business, attended by more than 300 people. The next slide actually is explaining the history of food travel in Indonesia. It dates back more than a century ago. Here you can see on the slide some writing of Albert Russel Wallace, an extraordinary British naturalist who traveled from 1854 to 1862 to many islands in Indonesia. His famous book, The Malay Archipelago, was first published in 1869 as a scientific and personal account of his travels. I would like to quote a piece of writing about his encounter with durian, known as the king of fruits. I think if he were still alive, Alfred Wallace would have been an award-winning food writer. And I quote, "When brought into a house, the smell is often so offensive that some persons can never bear to taste it. But in Borneo, I found a ripe fruit on the ground, and eating it out of doors, I at once became a confirmed durian eater." He further wrote, "The pulp is the eatable part, and its consistency and flavor are indescribable. A rich, butter-like custard, highly flavored with almonds, gives the best general idea of it. But intermingled with it come wafts of flavor that call to mind cream cheese, onion sauce, brown sherry, and other incongruities. In fact," he said, "to eat durian is a new sensation, worth a voyage through the East to experience." Indonesia is wonderful. It is the largest archipelagic nation in the world. As you can see from the picture, it has many islands, about more than 13,000 islands, and 98 cities, 74,000 villages, and 255 million people. Lying along the equator, the country is situated between the continents of Asia and Australia, and between the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. It is wide as the United States from San Francisco to New York, and the distance is like between London to Moscow. And as I mentioned earlier, administratively speaking, the country has 34 provinces, 98 cities, and 74,000 villages. And it's exciting to see the number of volcanoes and the length of coastlines, as well as the dense tropical rainforest. They all contribute to Indonesia's food diversity and food travel options. Indonesia is known as the Ring of Fire, where there are 400 volcanoes, 130 of them active volcanoes. Actually, it's amazing that more than 75% of Indonesian residents live within 100 kilometers of a volcano. Many live near dangerous areas because volcanic deposits can develop into some of the richest agricultural lands on Earth. Indonesia is identified to have 700 regional languages and dialects, but fortunately we have one original or national language taught in school, which we call Bahasa Indonesia. Hundreds of ethnic groups that we have correlate to the ethnic food diversity in Indonesia. So you see 200 ethnic groups. If one ethnic group has many food diversity, then you can imagine what we have in the country. Actually, we can see why food travel in Indonesia is unique. There are at least 5,300 ethnic foods in our country, influenced by nature, trade, history, politics, and religion. We have choices from street food to fine dining and rice tafel, a medley of dishes from all over the country, to molecular gastronomy, serving specifically Indonesian food. Indonesia is also a coffee paradise. You may know that the famous brew is, of course, Kopi Luwak, a civet coffee, the rarest, most expensive coffee in the world, mentioned in the movie The Bucket List starring Jack Nicholson. Opportunities abundant to visit places where foodstuffs are grown, market trips to meet with communities, stopping by local homes to see cooking process, and learn how to properly enjoy the food. Interestingly, traveler can combine food and thematic tourism, such as exploring scenic mountain views, lush rainforests, highways to surf, and deep blue oceans to dive in if you're a diver. Special interest tourism that can feature Indonesian cuisines, including cruise ships, health spa, history, where travelers enjoy UNESCO World Heritage Sites, such as the Borobudur Buddhist Temple, or Subak, a 1,000-year-old irrigation system in Bali. Or we can also combine food with MICE, meeting, incentive, conventions, and exhibition. It is actually hard to name one cuisine as Indonesia's national dish, but nasi tumpeng may be the closest one. As you can see in the foreground of the slide, it is a cone-shaped rice surrounded by assorted side dishes served to celebrate the happy cycle of life, such as birth, birthdays, or marriage. It is also present in important events, such as openings of new buildings and restaurants, or the country's Independence Day. The cone in nasi tumpeng is a mystic symbol of the Creator, while the side dishes is an illustration of life and harmony of nature. Different regions, as we know Indonesia has 34 provinces, may have different local side dishes prepared with a variety of cooking traditions. But nasi tumpeng, as you can see, is very, very colorful and tastes good too. Based on our observations and activities, there are several ways of how Indonesia is promoted or can be promoted as a foodie destination. The first one is government intervention, such as a policy to serve local food in government meetings, or initiatives and events that I will explain later. Second, the role of business. Food companies and small-medium enterprises triggered food travel. There are, at last count, 3 million small-medium food enterprises around the country. Banks, financial institutions can sponsor festival or education concerning the food travel industry. The media, including print, electronic, and social media, publish food travel information. The third one is international tie-in, or as I put on the slide, international participation. United Nations organizations such as the World Tourism Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization have international days that we celebrate. Jamie Oliver Foundation, the famous British chef, he initiated Food Revolution, celebrated globally. The last one, which I think is the most important and the most innovative, are community efforts in awareness raising and organizing public events. These are mostly conducted by food lovers and non-profit organizations. This slide says 30 Indonesian traditional culinary icons. It is actually a government initiative to heavily promote Indonesian food in country and abroad as flagship products for tourist attraction. Besides the famous rendang, chosen as the most delicious food in the world by CNN, it is a caramelized beef curry, and we also have nasi goreng or fried rice. Besides those food, there are appetizers, main courses, drinks and desserts, and the selection and decision that what to include in the culinary icons took a long process, and it was based on certain criteria. For example, the ingredients must be easy to find, both inside or outside Indonesia. The cuisine must have been known by Indonesians, and there should be professionals involved in preparing the food. To promote the dishes abroad through Indonesian food diplomacy and nation branding, Indonesian embassies worldwide are encouraged to always feature the iconic dishes at every event that they hold, not only during food festivals. I also would like to share another government initiative. The Creative Economy Agency was set up by the President to help formulate, establish, coordinate, and synchronize policies in the field of creative economy. In Indonesia, the food sector or the culinary sector is considered one of the creative economy subsector. So the creative economy contributed to Indonesia's gross domestic product, and they are mostly from the culinary subsector, which is 32% contribution, fashion, about 28% contribution, crafts, 14%, and publishing and printing, about 8% contribution. And also, interestingly, 90% of the employment in the creative industry is contributed by fashion, food, and crafts. But it is important to know that culinary in the creative economy has its own definition, as you can see from the slide. It's the preparation, processing, presentation of food and drink products that make the elements of, and I emphasize, creativity, aesthetics, tradition, and or local wisdom. So those are the important aspects. If it has no creativity or no aesthetics, you don't call it culinary in the creative economy. There are some food travel festivals organized in the country because they provide numerous benefits for a community and tourism region, including increasing visitation and expenditure, reduced seasonality, repeat visitation, and heightened regional awareness and word-of-mouth recommendation. The one on top is the Traditional Food Travel Week. It's organized by the government, and it has a main goal to encourage local governments together with relevant stakeholders to build the competitiveness of Indonesia culinary travel destination. The second one is organized by the Indonesia Tourism Promotion Board, and we call it INA Culinary Fair. There are festivals around the country organized by private companies like Bango and Mandiri. And then each region, like the provinces or the regencies, usually have their regional food festival. And the World Food Day event is an annual national program in conjunction with the UN World Food Day, and it's usually attended by the president. I also would like to share with you the role of passionate foodies to promote food travel in Indonesia. The upcoming Ubud Food Festival in June of this year is a sister event of the Ubud Writers and Readers Festival founded by Janet Denise in Bali. She's a culinary impresario and also a food writer with numerous articles and several books. The Ubud Food Festival will bring together Indonesia's most exciting chefs while focusing on Bali's extraordinary local produce and vibrant food scenes. The program will feature 3 days of panel discussions, workshops, cooking demonstrations, master classes, and field trips. Long table lunches will be held in magnificent locations across Ubud in Bali, while full nighttime program will include music, film, dining, and a night market under the stars. So you can imagine what an exciting food travel it will be. Kelana Rasa Culinary Solutions is another example of how a passionate foodie promotes Indonesian food diversity. Owned and organized by Ari Parikesit, a former international development professional. I remember yesterday, Mr. Kost explained that some of the food travel guides are in their second career. So I think this is what happened with Ari Parikesit as well. So he had traveled all over Indonesia and turned his love for food into a new career. And Kelana Rasa has exotic food tours. One example is a tour to Central Kalimantan, formerly called Borneo, like in Alfred Russell's writings, where you can see unusual food ingredients such as rattan shoot. You can see on the picture on the left, the long thing over there. It's actually a young rattan shoot. Rattan, when mature, is a material for furniture, but young rattan is a local delicacy. One popular dish on the far right is called Juhu Singkah Tekuluk Patin. It's a little bit difficult to pronounce, but it is made from rattan, catfish or patin in Bahasa Indonesia, and sour eggplant. The sour eggplant is on the left, actually, on the far left at the bottom. Those are sour eggplants. The taste is really interesting. It's a mixture of savory, sour, a little bit hot, and tints of sweet and bitter. Kelana Rasa also has an upcoming trip to Gorontalo. It's actually the land of my ancestors. It's a new province on the island of Sulawesi, Indonesia, that has a wealth of nature and culture. The philosophy of honesty in Gorontalo, in that area, is illustrated through hot and spicy foods without sugar and synthetic flavoring. Traditionally, snacks in Gorontalo are not made of wheat flour, but of corn, cassava, sweet potato, banana, and rice flour. There is a certain food, it's called ilabulo. It's shown on the picture on the left. It is a typical food of Gorontalo, wrapped in banana leaves, consisting of chicken liver, gizzard, and egg, grilled on top of coconut shell, mixed with candlenut shells for the aroma. Ilabulo was the snack of Gorontalo kings back in the 1700s to 1800s. It is now a famous street food, full of sensory delights if we were to visit that place. And food travel in Gorontalo can also combine with island hopping or island crossing, like my son did. He's the one on the right, crossing 2 islands. Well, actually, you can have the islands, several islands, all to yourself. Or you can pretend to be a princess protected in an ancient fort complex. According to history, in the 15th century, Portuguese sailors stopped in Gorontalo because of bad weather, pirate threat. It's not pirate of the Caribbean, but pirate of Gorontalo, perhaps, and lack of food. They offered the king of Gorontalo to build 3 forts on top of hills to protect the area. The uniqueness of the forts, on the picture it's just 1 fort, but there are 3 forts in the area. The uniqueness lies in the materials used to build them, which was a mixture of sand, plaster, and the white part of maleo bird eggs. Maleo is really a small bird. In Latin name is Macrocephalon maleo. It is endemic to the area, and maleo bird has enormous eggs, 4 times the size of chicken eggs. So that's about Gorontalo. And now I would like to share some community efforts that help promote Indonesia as a foodie or as foodies destination. On screen, you can see logos of some communities but I will only explain a few in the interest of time. The first one is the Indonesian food blogger. You can see the logo on the right side, on the far right in the middle. It is a group that unites Indonesian food bloggers who reside in many countries of the world and to promote Indonesian cuisine abroad. The group has 13,000 members and has a unique way to keep their members active in preserving Indonesian food and drink. They usually regularly organize challenges to post on social media the food they cook or a drink they prepare. And then the members will vote who will get the most votes, then will get some presents like kitchen appliances or some trips to exotic areas in Indonesia. The one that I will also explain is ACMI, ACMI, on the top on the left. It means I love Indonesian cuisine. It is a community with a vision to preserve, develop, document, and disseminate a wealth of information on traditional culinary culture of Indonesia. And the last one is Jalan Sutra. You see the JS logo near the Omar Niode Foundation logo. It is a community that appreciates Indonesian food and culture. Its members discuss all aspects of food and taste and organize food events. JS has an active mailing list with more than 16,000 members. Another important role in promoting Indonesia as foodies destination is the media. The media has catapulted interest in domestic food travel. Whereas 5 to 10 years ago, Indonesian media coverage on food is limited to recipes mostly, and sometimes restaurant reviews. Nowadays, the coverage is more in-depth. Story and history of food begin to grace print and electronic media. Editors give multiple pages for food travel coverage. Most TV stations in Indonesia, either public or commercial, also allocated hours of food travel programs. Well, after all those explanations about interventions, actually we would like to know, or we have questions. Do the interventions work? What are the lessons learned? By the way, the picture on the screen, if you can see, it's a century-old house. It's almost 100 years old. It's a family home that we use for culinary events. And as explained in the previous slides, more and more Indonesian media cover food travel, and the number keeps increasing. We don't have data on food travelers to Indonesia, but judging from social media, the interest in food travel is escalating. Also, there is an increase in requests to learn about Indonesian cuisines from culinary schools in the United States, Europe, and Middle East. And these are world-class schools like the Culinary Institute of America. The lessons learned, we have to develop indicators to measure success that neither need a lot of human resources nor extraordinary budget to spend. We also have to keep finding information such as recipes and stories and translate them into English for global knowledge. It is also important to explore all aspects of food travel, as we did in a seminar with the World Food Travel Association, where Eric was the keynote speaker last year. And among the items or the aspects that we have to explore are food travel destinations in Indonesia, food travel experiences. We should ask people what their experiences are. And also, we should also communicate with food travel operators and encourage them to do food travel trips all over the country. Towards the end of my session, let's return to Albert Russel Wallace, the scientist traveler. He's a friend of Charles Darwin, actually. And he spent 8 years in the tropic countries of Southeast Asia more than a century ago. He wrote about the beauty of sunrise in the tropics. And I quote, "The temperature is the most delicious conceivable. The slight chill of dawn, which was itself agreeable, is succeeded by an invigorating warmth, and the bright sunshine lights up the glorious vegetation of the tropics and realizes all that the magic art of the painter or the glowing words of the poet have pictured as their ideals of a terrestrial paradise. It is really an honor to be able to speak at this online food travel summit. Eric, thank you again. And delegates, you are kindly invited to visit our website. They're on the screen at www.omarniode.org. Readers will find in our blog page knowledge and experience enlightening the endless opportunities in the field of agriculture, food travel, and culinary arts. Please do not hesitate to drop us a line if you need any information on food travel in wonderful Indonesia. Thank you again for listening to this session.
Thank you, Amanda. That was wonderful, very interesting. And I forgot to say in the beginning of the session how Amanda and I met. Amanda became an ambassador of the World Food Travel Association, and we had been talking, for more than a year, and then I was going to be in her part of the world, and she says, well, you should just come over to Jakarta and visit with us. And it was a true pleasure to experience, well, first of all, to meet Amanda in person and her family, but to experience Indonesian food and the culture all at once. And I really had no expectations of what Indonesian food would be like. I thought it might be kind of similar to Malay or Thai, and it kind of is, but there's a lot of differences, and it's really, really fantastic. I loved it. And I do think that Indonesia is kind of a diamond in the rough for cuisine, and I think it could be one of the next big cuisines out there. It was fantastic. I still remember, do you remember visiting the magazine, Amanda, and those little peanut flat, they were served almost like bread, but they were the peanut ones, they were flat, and they had an herb in them also?
I don't remember what they are.
Anyway, those were amazing. They were savory. And those 30 culinary icons, I would think Amanda did her best job to try and introduce me to most of them. And I remember the tumpeng, which is really quite fun. It's always different. It comes in that little pyramid or cone shape, and it was a lot of fun. So anyway, I'd like to open up the session to questions now. And go ahead and put your questions in the right-hand side. There's a chat window there in the lower right, and you can just send it to either everyone or you can send it to me privately, and I will moderate the question. So our first question is, how much more space is there for growth in Indonesia food tourism? With such a wonderful variety of cuisines in your country, it seems strange that Indonesian food is lagging behind other regional cuisines in terms of international popularity.
Actually, there are lots of space to grow in terms of areas and in terms of food as well. I think we're just not exposed enough now because there's the social media and there are more people who are promoting Indonesia. We are getting acknowledged by many countries and many people in the world. And like I mentioned, culinary schools all over the world would like to learn about Indonesia. But as I mentioned in my previous slides, the materials should be available. The ingredients should be available. That's why the culinary icon was decided based on whether we could find the materials abroad, not only in Indonesia.
Excellent. I think it's noteworthy to point out that the country is really quite big. There's 255 million people, and it's maybe something that we don't think about, but that is almost the size of the United States. It's more than the population of Brazil. It's enormous, and I think that's perhaps one reason why you've had so much success is that with such a large population, there are these resources. There's a magazine that's been publishing for years. It's been doing a lot of really beautiful work. There are all these organizations that you showed on the slides, Amanda. I mean, with a population base as large as yours, you have these resources that are being developed. And I think maybe for smaller destinations that don't have such a large population base, can you offer them any advice? So, in the early days before this all started getting organized in Indonesia, let's look at a smaller island nation or a small nation that's surrounded by giants. What would be your advice to them?
Well, actually, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to find the story and the history behind the food. However delicious they are, if you have no story, you have nothing. I learned that the hard way, actually, and I learned it from you as well, Eric. So
No.
you have to have stories from the World Food Travel Association. You have to have stories, legacy, history. I showed you the picture of a king in Gorontalo, and that makes the story more interesting rather than just show the picture in the food in a wrapped banana leaves.
That's true. The stories are very important. So if I only had one place and limited time for food travel in Indonesia, where should I go? Where should one go?
It depends whether you like crowds or you like island hopping, like I explained earlier. Of course, you can go to Gorontalo, the land of my ancestors, and you can find everything there, the food and also the nature. But then if you would like to see culture, if you like to see your fellow travelers, then you go to Bali because Bali is really interesting. It has lots of innovation in terms of food travels. And there are lots of food travel guides there as well.
You know, it's true. I've been to Bali and to Ubud specifically, and the food there was very different from Jakarta. And with such a large country, the foods are so diverse. When I was in Jakarta with Amanda, we attended the event that she mentioned, and they had regional foods for people to taste afterwards in a reception. So I was able to try a couple things from her part of Indonesia called Gorontalo. And it's also different. I mean, with 17,000 or 13,000 islands? I lost track.
It's more than 13,000 islands.
Lots of islands. You can imagine that the foods are very different from one end of the country to the other. So we have a question. There are a few food tour operators on the presentation today, and someone was asking, is it better to focus on regional destinations for a week or so, or expand the itinerary? It seems impossible to cover everything. Do you have suggestions for which regions to introduce to our clients?
Yeah, it's worth it to have regional tours based on islands. For example, Kalimantan or Borneo, like Alfred Russell mentioned, and also the Sumatra is also good. They have really delicious food, and also in Java you can see lots of things. But then again, of course, it will depend on the time travel that you prefer. In some cases, you can go to Jakarta to the place for 1.5 hours flying time. But to go to the Gorontalo, my ancestors' land, you need at least 3 hours flying time. So it depends. And I would suggest that you do the travel based on islands.
Okay, next question. How do you inform food travelers about the diversity and difference of the cultures and the cultural etiquette in Indonesia?
It is almost impossible actually to do that. Like in my case, I concentrate mostly on the Gorontalo area. But the food travel operator that I mentioned, Kelana Rasa, they do lots of travels all over Indonesia. Based on people's interest, of course. At first, you will inform people that these are the tours that we are going to have. We are not as sophisticated as the Chicago Food Planet yesterday, but we try to gauge people's interest on the tour. If we have enough participants, then we'll do it. But then, of course, in one of the pictures that I showed you, the logos, there is a community food travel guide. So it's very, very cheap. Like for $10, you can go for several hours in an area. And they're mostly suitable for backpackers who would like to save some money. But it doesn't mean that the quality is lower than the high-end food travel guides.
Okay. The next question has to do with government, and this is something that I see a lot is, to what extent should the government be involved? Can it be involved? Has it been involved? So the question here is, how much has the government come to understand that Indonesia is an undiscovered jewel for food travelers? Is the government's push to promote the country for foodies a long-term project? Is it too early to talk about results?
I think it is too early to talk about results. That's true because the Indonesian culinary icon, we just started that about 3 years ago. Now there's a change in government. We hope that it will still continue the promotion of the culinary icons. But with the Creative Economy Agency, at least the government is showing their responsibility that creative economy is also important. And by government, you don't just mean the central government, but there are also regional governments. They have been very strong in promoting food in their area. I mentioned about provinces, regencies, and even villages.
Okay, wonderful. Someone here is interested in learning if there are initiatives for food and conservation learning, so things that are put together, I think.
Yes, there are several international NGOs that are doing that. I won't mention the name of the NGO because this is not their promotion. But for example, there's an NGO that works on Indonesian seafood. You know, not only explaining the importance of conservation, but also how to preserve seafood, and also they provide some recipes for seafood.
So would that be part of the, I forget what it's called, is a Marine Steward Council or something like that? Are they part of that initiative?
No, this is the initiative of some non-government organizations, and some are concentrating on forest products as well. There are several organizations that are concentrating on food from forests. For example, honey from the forest, and there are several types of honey, and they could explain that this is honey from this type of tree, and this is from this island, and things like that. I didn't even mention honey. Oh, we have abundance of honey types here in Indonesia.
Honey, wow. Interesting, because usually you think of grass and meadows for honey, you know, but interesting. I bet it tastes wonderful.
And you know what? We did we have also programs for kids, and we did honey tasting. So we gave children several types of honey and asked them to taste it. And we asked them, what's your impression? What does this taste between this and this and that? And they said, they're all sweet. So we have to explain that this has a little bit peanutty taste. This is a little bit bitter, for example, or fruity.
Nice. So the next question is, does Indonesia have an official food circuit in place? And if so, how did you put it in place? And by food circuit, they mean a specific tour linking local and regional producers, delivering an enhanced touristic experience for the consumer, such as food tasting, interpretation, farm activities, and so on.
We haven't done that far. There are food circuits, but those who go through that circuit are mostly journalists on investigative reportings. And I showed one of the picture in the magazine as well. So they travel to 8 areas in Indonesia, and then they will publish what they find out in those areas, in what they call a food circuit as well, but not for consumers yet. And I think that's a good idea.
Maybe that's an opportunity for tour operators to put something like that together. I mean, if the precedent is already there for doing it for journalists, why not for consumers and also the tour operators on the call today?
Mm-hmm.
One question came in about language, and so obviously on site, you know, people can have guides and interpreters, but in terms of printed publications and websites and getting the word out there in advance, what issues does Indonesia have in terms of language and getting awareness out to the rest of the world?
We have a website also by the government, but it doesn't look like a government website. It's really professional. And let's see, I think it's called Indonesia.travel, www.indonesia.travel. or travel.indonesia, the other way around. But it has all kinds of information, not only about the country, but also the areas to see and also the cuisines in the country. And I think that's your best bet to know about Indonesia in general. And of course, our website is also in English.
That's true. Yours is. I'm on the government website right now, and here we go. So on the far right, so it's Indonesia.travel. On the far right, there's an activities section, and then you scroll down to cuisine, and then there's a picture of a man playing a guitar. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
and the cuisines are from all over the provinces, not only in one place. So you can see all kinds of information about the Indonesian provinces in that website. And I think that's a good website.
Yeah, there's some different articles here. There's one about a specialty fish soup. There's Jakarta, the Jakarta dining experience. There's Jakarta street food scene. So there's some information here. It seems like there's some opportunity to do a little bit more. Maybe that's another project for Omar Niode Foundation, Amanda.
Yeah, and also some of the areas in that website have a booklet, a thicker guide. I think Jakarta has one there. You can download it from that website, and then maybe Bandung, about 4 hours from the capital city, also has a good guidebook on food travel.
Oh, nice. Here's another question. Do the Indonesian food bloggers have a common website that they use to promote themselves together, or are they just independent?
They have a website, and they have a Facebook page as well. I haven't visited their website for some time, but I work with them. For example, we were promoting cassava, and there was a challenge to make recipe out of cassava, and we've published a book with the Indonesian food bloggers, and they publish whatever they do on their website. You can Google Indonesia Food Blogger Group.
And so they do work together as a group then?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Nice. That's really smart because together they're stronger. The voice of 10 or 12 or 20 people, whatever it is, speaking together as opposed to 20 individual voices. Much stronger.
Yeah, right. And what's interesting about them is they're not commercial at all. Yeah, maybe sometimes they go to several restaurants for reviews, but they do it because they like it, because they like cooking, they like showing their pictures as well.
Here's a really interesting question. Is there a guide or organization that would focus on the religious aspects of food culture?
Not really religious aspects of food cultures, but like the Indonesian Islamic groups, they have some information on what food that they can eat and what they cannot eat, and also recipes. So not only the prohibition of what not to eat, but also how can you prepare some food. And there are also festivals on halal food that can be eaten by Muslims. So they have a special festival. And interestingly, the festival is not only attended by Indonesians as participants, but there are also people from all over the world who show their products in that halal food festival.
Interesting. So how would someone learn more about that? Would they just Google, obviously, the Halal Food Festival, but is there a resource that someone could go to learn more about that?
Mostly in Indonesian, but in Bahasa Indonesia, but you can drop me a line. I'll try to find out more information about that.
Okay, wonderful. Do any of these food traveler organizations have television shows or other kinds of exposure?
Which one is it? As I mentioned, there are TV stations that have food travel shows. Was that your question? No,
I think that these either these tour operators or these organizations promoting food travel like yours or the food bloggers or that slide of the different organizations, do any of them have any television shows or any other kinds of exposure like that, or perhaps a radio show?
Not a regular show, but they're always being interviewed by a lot of media, including TV, radio, print media as well, and magazine and newspapers, but they don't have their own shows.
Okay. And would you say that these companies have a good amount of funding, relatively speaking, for doing what they're doing in Indonesia? Are they relatively well funded or not so much?
Which one? Which organizations? The Food Traveler?
Well, I would say perhaps those, let's talk about two kinds, the organizations that you put up on the slide, and then any kind of the food travel companies as well.
Mm-hmm. No, they're not. They don't borrow money from the bank. Like I said, they're passionate people. Sometimes we pitch in so that we could organize some events, and sometimes there are corporate social responsibility funds that they can use for their activities. Mostly that.
Okay. And then what would be other ways that they generate revenue? Obviously, they could have a festival of some kind, which could bring in income, sponsorships. Are any of them membership-based, for instance?
Some of them are membership-based, but one that I know that has membership-based has not been very successful. In doing some activities. The passionate ones, the passionate foodies, are usually more successful because they're doing it with love. And like most food bloggers or food people, it's their voluntary job, not their main job. They have other hats as well.
Well, I think that's true for everyone these days. You almost need to have 3 careers going at the same time, and whatever one, we say in English, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So whatever one is doing the best at that time, you focus on that. And anyway, well, that's it for questions. Amanda has generously put her email on the screen there, as well as her Twitter handle, and you can visit her website as well. And I know that she'd be very happy to answer any specific offline questions that anyone would like to answer. Amanda, I would love to just thank you so much. It's truly an honor knowing you. You're a very wise person, and I appreciate your sharing your time and your experience with our delegates today.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to everyone soon. Thanks again.